Picture the mark of the beast without special effects. No smoke, no heavy metal soundtrack, no horned creature bursting through the floorboards of your local grocery store. Just a quiet sentence that settles over a society like frost. You can live normally again, if you agree. That's where Revelation puts the terror, not in theatrics, in consent. Because the beast in Revelation isn't simply a monster, it's a system that becomes a god, a human arrangement that learns how to convert fear into loyalty, loyalty into obedience, and obedience into a kind of worship that people insist is just practical. And the reason this phenomenon exists is brutally simple. We are the species that will trade truth for safety, one small compromise at a time, and then defend the trade as wisdom. Revelation is not the only tradition that noticed this. It's just one of the most vivid. Across cultures, there's a recurring insight. When human power grows hungry enough, it doesn't merely want taxes or labor. It wants the place in your soul where ultimate belongs. It wants what you are not supposed to give to anything that can be bribed, threatened, or voted in. Revelation calls that hunger the beast, and it describes its method: identity capture and economic capture, welded together by deception. The mark appears in that weld. The text says the mark is placed on the forehead or the right hand, and that without it no one can buy or sell. People often argue about whether it's a tattoo, a brand, a chip, a biometric credential, a digital account, a medical procedure, a passport, a QR code, a currency, a neural implant, or whatever the era's most plausible lever happens to be. But Revelation doesn't start by describing hardware. It starts by describing worship. The mark comes packaged with a demand: worship the beast and its image. That's not a small detail. It's the spine of the whole thing. The mark is not presented as a clerical mistake you stumble into while trying to buy milk. In the story, it's the visible sign of a deeper surrender. The beast has won your allegiance. So why forehead and hand? Because those two locations summarize the whole human being. The forehead is what owns your mind, your worldview, your identity, what you treat as sacred, the story you live inside. The hand is what you do, your labor, your participation, your compliance, the ordinary actions that keep the machine running. In other words, belief and behavior, the interior and the exterior, the yes you think and the yes you perform. That's why the mark is so potent as a symbol. It's not merely about being tracked. Humans have always been tracked. It is about being claimed. Then comes the number 666. Revelation says it takes wisdom to understand it, and calls it the number of a man. That's a clue that you're not dealing with a magic spell, but a kind of coded signature. In the ancient world, letters could also be numbers and names could be counted. Many interpreters believe 666 functions like a cipher pointing to a specific historical embodiment of a violent empire in John's time, commonly associated with the Roman imperial world and its notorious rulers. The point isn't trivia. The point is recognition. The beast is not an abstract demon floating above history. It shows up in governments, economies, and crowds when power stops being a tool and starts demanding worship. But 666 also has a second punch. Biblical symbolism often treats 7 as completeness. 6 is short of it, so 666 is falling short, stacked 3 high, a counterfeit trinity of incompleteness. The number reads like a sneer carved into the beast's crown. This thing will promise salvation, but it cannot make you whole. And yet people will serve it anyway, because it offers what it always offers: a life that feels stable if you stop asking certain questions. Now, Revelation pairs the mark with something else. The seal of God. The seal is also placed on the forehead, and later imagery describes God's name on the foreheads of those who belong to the Lamb. It's the same placement because it's the same category, a sign of ownership and allegiance. So you have two rival brands, not brands like products, brands like kings. One says you belong to the beast, the other says you belong to God. And here is where the harsh truth emerges. The seal is not primarily something you detect with a prophecy flashlight. The seal is revealed by what you refuse to do when refusal has a cost. The sealed are the ones whose worship cannot be bought. That's the narrative. Now widen the lens beyond Christianity, because this pattern has cousins. In Islam, you find the figure of the Dajjal, a great deceiver associated with distortion and false authority, whose trial involves confusion, spectacle, and the pressure to follow what is not true. The details differ, but the moral geometry rhymes. Deception that demands allegiance. In Buddhism, there is Mara, not merely a devil, but the personification of temptation, delusion, and the forces that keep beings trapped. Mara doesn't usually need chains. Mara uses craving, fear, and illusion. The method is internal capture that becomes external compliance. In Hindu thought, you hear about Kali Yuga, an age marked by moral inversion, spiritual forgetfulness, and the corrosion of truth. Again, it's not a one-to-one match, but the recurring theme appears. A period where distortion becomes normal and the sacred is traded for convenience. Even outside religion, the same fear shows up in secular dystopias. The state that doesn't just punish crime, but punishes thought. The society that doesn't merely regulate behavior, but requires belief. The economy that doesn't merely reward productivity, but rewards ideological obedience. The nightmare is not that someone watches you. The nightmare is that someone can decide whether you get to exist normally based on whether you praise the correct idol. That's why the mark of the beast keeps returning as a cultural obsession. It's a symbol for something humans recognize in their bones. The moment a society builds a gate and puts a priest at it. Now bring it into real time. We live in an age with unprecedented choke points, not because technology is evil, but because technology can concentrate power. Money increasingly moves through systems that can be paused, flagged, frozen, scored. Work flows through platforms, speech routes through networks. Identity is mediated by accounts and credentials. Many of these tools are useful. Some are necessary, but Revelation's question is not, do tools exist? The question is, can these tools be fused into a loyalty engine? Because Revelation's mark is an engine component. It's a mechanism that ties together three forces: worship, a demand for ultimate allegiance; commerce, the power to permit or deny ordinary life; deception, the ability to frame coercion as virtue. If those three converge, you're in beast territory, even if nobody uses religious language. In modern society, worship doesn't always look like kneeling at an altar. Sometimes it looks like declaring something beyond criticism. Sometimes it looks like treating a leader, a nation, a party, a cause, or even a side as morally infallible. Sometimes it looks like sacrificing human dignity to stay in good standing with your tribe. And commerce doesn't always look like a marketplace with coins. Sometimes it looks like access to banking, employment, health services, education, social participation, and digital presence. Buy and sell in modern life can mean function. So what would mark-like pressure feel like today? It would feel like your livelihood is gradually becoming conditional on a public allegiance you cannot offer in good conscience. Not merely follow laws, but affirm this as sacred. Not merely be polite, but say what we say or lose what you need. Not merely don't harm others, but celebrate what you believe is false. The beast rarely begins with cruelty. It begins with normalization. It begins with the promise of safety and the threat of exclusion. And the seal. In real time, the seal would show up as a kind of inner anchoredness that becomes visible in choices. You refuse to lie to keep access. You refuse to hate to keep belonging. You refuse to worship power to keep comfort. You refuse to become what you fear. The seal looks like a person who cannot be purchased by the currencies of the age, whether those currencies are money, status, security, or applause. Now the question everyone asks, are we close? Close to what? If you mean, are we close to having the technical infrastructure that could enforce buying and selling restrictions? In many places, yes. The infrastructure exists or is emerging. That's simply a fact of modern complexity. If you mean, are we close to the full Revelation 13 convergence of worship demand, plus economic exclusion, plus organized deception? That's harder. And anyone who speaks with complete certainty is selling something. Revelation is less a calendar and more a mirror held to the face of power. But here is the uncomfortable conclusion that keeps the text alive. Even if the final form isn't here, the training ground is. The beast does not need to tattoo you to mark you. If it can get you to internalize the lie and perform the loyalty, you are already functioning as marked. The technology may change, but the moral transaction stays the same. Trade conscience for convenience. Trade truth for access. Trade worship for survival. And Revelation's answer is not panic, it's endurance. It's the refusal to let fear decide what is real. It's the insistence that the Lamb's way, the way of faithful witness, is not weakness but the only power that doesn't corrupt. So if you want to watch for signs, watch for the moment when the world starts asking for worship in exchange for groceries. And if you want to identify the seal, don't look for a glowing stamp. Look for the person who can lose something and still won't kneel to a lie.